Okay, so how do we determine plant and animal food resources and also elements of the environment? By looking at their ecofacts. Diba? Most of the time, well, occasionally, no, ecofacts of plants and animals and other organisms would turn up in the archaeological record. Some other climatic aspects would be, for example, ano pa ba? Ano pa yung mga alam niyo? Halimbawa, rainfall, ganyan, no? Rainfall or temperature, ganyan, during the past eras. How do we determine that? So for example, we take a look at course. No, for rainfall, we take a look at course. No, pero sa atin hindi natin masyadong ginagawa. Ginagawa 'yan dun sa mga polar regions or yung mga lugar na kung saan merong glaciers halimbawa. No? So they can get samplings of ice cores and then look at whether oxygen levels have been trending up or trending down in a particular era. Okay. Ano pa yung binabanggit natin? Temperature and also rainfall, no? Dryness, halimbawa humidity, no? Dryness and wetness could also be determined by the plant and animal species living in a locality. So for example, I think I mentioned to you about Lake Paway, no? Because Lake Paway in Ilocos Norte has been partly studied by palynologists. So they made coring, no? Coring of the lake bed to see the characteristic pollen. No? Pollen, alam niyo naman yung pollen, di ba? Pollen yung makikita sa mga bulaklak. This is part of the fertilization process of the flowering plants, no, pollen. At yung flowering plants talagang nagsisend off yan ng pollen. So the characteristic pollen profile of the lake sediments, so they would study that. Halimbawa, may mga nakita silang pollen or at least yung mga buto, no, ng pine, no, because technically pine is not is not a flowering plant. Although nagbibigay din naman sila ng ibang yung mga seeds, no? So-called seeds sa pwede mag-germinate, no? Just like ferns, no? Ferns technically are not flowering plants. Like halimbawa your gumamela or your cosmos, ganyan. But again, they still give off sort of what we can call pollen, and they could remain in the archaeological record or the palynological record. So we call the study of pollen as palynology. Okay, palynology. Study of pollen. So nakita nila na merong pine, no? Pine dun sa sediments ng Lake Paway. So possibly, pwedeng nung mga panahon na yon, no? There was a time when Lake Paway had cooler climatic regimes than we have now. No? So maybe pine trees grew more abundantly around the region, no? The northern Luzon region. Ganun din halimbawa sa dryness. No? There have been also pollen studies made, no, not only in Ilocos but also in northern Nueva Ecija, and they have found that there were drier regimes. Halimbawa, what could be indicative of this? No? The abundance of grasslands, grasses which would thrive best in drier climate. So pag dumami halimbawa yung mga grasses, generally ito ay nagsasabi ng drier climatic regimes. Okay, and this happened, they say, no, according to archaeologists, this generally happened during the time of the shift between the Paleolithic, no, or the Pleistocene into the Holocene. Okay, Pleistocene to Holocene, no? Period. No? So mas basa ito, no? The climate here generally cooler and in tropical regions wetter than the Holocene, which is drier and warmer in temperature. These are geological terms. No? When we want to refer to cultural terms, we use Paleolithic, no? Neolithic, no? So Neolithic muna ang gagamitin natin ngayon, no? Kasi hindi pa convention na gumamit ng Mesolithic sa atin. Okay? So the transition, no? from the Pleistocene into the Holocene is marked by dryness, no? A trend towards dryness. So ano pa? Subsistence, economy. How about the Austronesian theory? Do you have any questions about the Austronesian theory and the Neolithic? Explain naman yata yun, no? Generally, we have the movement of the so-called Austronesians, no? From Taiwan going south, no? Going south to the Philippines, and then having more than one route, no? In several, no? Or in a few directions. When we say Austronesian, we are referring actually to the language family, no? Because the concept, this concept of Austronesian as now, no, being applied to people, to refer to people, originally was derived from linguistic terms, no? Yung Austronesian na term ay pangalan nila yan sa isang language family kung saan kabilang ang Tagalog or Ilocano, Kapampangan, Cebuano, Hiligaynon or Ilonggo. Lahat yan, no? The native languages of the Philippines. Except English and Hokkien, halimbawa, no? Hokkien yung language ng mga Chinoy natin. Sometimes they would speak it in their own households, no? or in business, no? In transaction. And then so these are not Austronesians, no? These are not Austronesian languages. And then we have Chavacano. Are you familiar with Chavacano? No, being anthromajors. No? Saan nyo pwede marinig ang Chavacano? Anong lugar? Okay, Zamboanga and Cavite, Spanish Creole. Yes, tama. So in Cavite, no, pero hindi sa buong Cavite, no. Halimbawa sa Cavite City, no, may mga ilan pa doon na nagsasalita ng Chavacano. Also in Ternate, Cavite, no. So sometimes you would see the signs in Ternate being written in Chavacano. Halimbawa yung mga traffic signs nila doon, may makikita ka. But only in those towns. Otherwise in the other towns of Cavite, halimbawa like Dasmariñas or Silang or Tagaytay, ganyan, no? Or Trias or Carmona, walang ganyan. No? And then also in Zamboanga, no? Also in Basilan. In Cotabato, I am not sure, no? Maybe, no, if there are migrants from Zamboanga. No? So these are Chavacano is a language that was formed from Spanish and I think also Portuguese, no, because the people who speak it, no, their ancestors came from part of that, no, lalong-lalo na yung mga nasa Cavite, no, nasa Ternate at saka sa Cavite City. They came from Indonesia, from Ternate, Indonesia, and na dinala sila ng mga mga Kastila, no, para i-resettle sa Cavite. Nung pumasok na yung mga ibang European powers doon, like the Dutch, no, and they were about to conquer Indonesia. Okay? Makanis Patwa. Yes. From Aldous. Okay, so hindi lang naman siya Vakana yan, no? Yung Creole languages na nabubuo sa Southeast Asia. In other parts of Southeast Asia, there are also Creole languages like in Malaysia. Okay, nasaan na ako? So Austronesian, no? So hindi ito Austronesian. No? But the languages of the Agtas, Dumagats, of the Ita are Austronesian. And they could not be classified into another language family. Dahil sa isolation nila, masyadong naging distinct yung language nila such that linguists would be prompted to classify them into a new language. So iba yung language, no? Iba yung language, iba yung dialect, no? So many people would take this as synonymous, pero magkaiba ito, di ba? Siguro na-explain na sa inyo. Halimbawa, Tagalog, no? If we take Tagalog, yung language ay Tagalog, but the dialects of Tagalog would be the language spoken halimbawa in Metro Manila. No? I think some would say that Filipino, the designated national language is a dialect of Tagalog. May mga ibang nag-consider niyan. And then also, halimbawa, another dialect would be the Tagalog of Batangas, no? Of Batanggenyo. Iba na naman yan. No? Noong unang panahon, hindi nga kinoconsider na Tagalog yan, no? According to some accounts. Iba kasi yung ano nila, no? Iba yung tunog, no? And then it also copies Visayan grammar, no? Partly, no? The Tagalog of Batangas. Same way as Marinduque Tagalog, ganun din, no? May pagka-Bisaya na siya. Bulacan Tagalog is another one, another dialect. And some would say the Tagalog of Laguna and Rizal, the areas around Laguna, di ba eh? So ito yung mga dialects ng Tagalog. Tagalog is a language. These are the dialects. Same thing halimbawa with Ilocano din. No? In Ilocano, there are distinct dialects. Halimbawa, the dialects spoken in the Ilocos region, halimbawa sa Vigan area would be different from slightly lang naman, no? Very slightly different from those spoken in northern central Luzon, which is assumed a new system, no? Although very, very slight lang. Ganun din halimbawa dun sa Baguio. The Baguio form would be much like Kangkanaoy or the other Igorot languages or the Cordilleran languages. Okay? So ito yung ano natin. Ha? So going back to Austronesian. So from Taiwan, papunta sila sa Pilipinas. And then pagdating sa Pilipinas, it seems that there are branches, no, going to, for example, going to Micronesia, or maybe Melanesia muna, no? When we say Micronesia, ito yung mga islands ng Guam, ng Saipan, yung ginawa ngayon na Federated States of Micronesia, no? So maybe those areas, or they may have proceeded directly to Melanesia. Melanesia. Yung mga offshore islands, no? From Papua New Guinea, no? That big island of New Guinea. So one of the branches went there, and then another one may have proceeded to Borneo. And then from Borneo, kumalat sa buong Indonesia. Or maybe meron din sa Sulawesi, no? That island directly south of Mindanao. Kasi dito tayo nakakita ng mga ng region ng great diversity when it comes to languages. And then from Borneo, from Malaysia, maybe a branch went into Madagascar. Do you know where Madagascar is, diba? It is the big island of Eastern Africa. Okay, so their language, no? At least the Malagasy language, no? Malagasy is part of the Austronesian family. Otherwise, yung mga ibang language nila doon would be part of the African family of languages. Okay, and then so balik tayo doon sa Southeast Asia, so Micronesia, and then from this island group and from Melanesia, kumalat na all the way, no? All throughout Polynesia, up to New Zealand, up to Hawaii. Okay, so Hawaii, the Hawaiian languages, which is spoken by a small percentage of the population, the native Hawaiians, would be Polynesian, and this would still be within the Austronesian family. The same thing with the Maoris. The Maori are the indigenous peoples of New Zealand. So aside from English, Maori too is spoken in New Zealand, and Maori is part of the Austronesian family. Yung isa pang malayong branch ay yung Rapa Nui. Rapa Nui is Easter Island. Yes, Aldous, Hawaii. Yung Easter Island, ito yung island na merong mga ulo, statue ng ulo, no? Tinatawag natin na Moai. May mga ganito na parang ganito yung itsura nila. Okay, yung mga ganyan, no, na itsura. Malalaking statues. So this is Rapa Nui or Easter Island. Okay, Rapa Nui or Easter Island. And their language and their native language should still be part of the Austronesian family. So hanggang doon nakaabot yung mga Austronesian speakers, no? Mas ganun yung tawag natin, Austronesian speakers. But now Rapa Nui is part of Chile, and Chile is Spanish, diba? So the official language there is Spanish. Like Hawaii, English naman. Also in New Zealand. Okay, so hindi lang naman basta-basta ganun yun, no? Nag-migrate sila, no? It went through centuries, no? Centuries naman, no? Hindi naman makakati ang paan nila na alis sila ng alis, no? Centuries na yung nag-lapse, although kumpara doon sa ibang migrations, no? Halimbawa within Asia, no? Medyo mabilis nga yung mga Austronesian. Kaya tinatawag halimbawa nila na we can call this, for example, according to them, as the Austronesian Express Train, no? Kasi nga napakabilis. Mabilis kasi yung artifacts na dinala nila, no? So it's not only language that they have brought, no? It is not only documented linguistically, no? But the evidence too would be in the artifacts. Halimbawa, yung mga potsherds na nakikita halimbawa sa Pilipinas, or partly dito sa Pilipinas halimbawa, ay nakikita rin nila na may similarities sa dun sa Melanesia, yung mga islands of the big island of New Guinea, no, in Melanesia. Okay, from Nicole Justin, sir, paano po nila na consider if part po talaga ng isang language family? No? So as linguists, they study maraming bagay, no? Maraming aspects ng language, so like the phonemes, di ba? If you have gone through anthropological linguistics, no? Yung phonemes, yung mga sounds, and then the morphemes, pag pinagdikit-dikit mo na yung phonemes, no? Yung mga syllables, no? And then also the grammar, the conjugation, lahat yan, no? Halimbawa, if you are familiar with Tagalog, di ba? With Tagalog and Ilocano and Bisaya, no? Siguro mapapansin niyo yung ano, no, yung similarities nito. Although halimbawa, makikita nyo kung ano yung mga language na mas similar sa isa't isa kaysa dun sa isa. No? Halimbawa, when you are familiar with these three, ano yung pwede nyong sabihin dito? No? Maybe Tagalog and Bisaya or Hiligaynon would be more similar to each other than they are to Ilocano. Diba? For those of you who are familiar. So maybe when you are a Tagalog speaker and you want to learn Bisaya, mas madali yon kaysa sa learning Ilocano kasi Ilocano would differ slightly, no, from the other two. Ganon din halimbawa yung Kapampangan o yung Pampanga language. Medyo may pagkakaiba. No? Halimbawa dun sa ano ba ang magandang example nito, no? Halimbawa the way they form their tenses, no? Tenses according to time, no? Mas mahirap i-conjugate yung Ilocano, no? Yung Ilocano verbs kaysa dun sa Tagalog at saka sa anong tawag na ito, sa Bisaya. Okay, same thing halimbawa with pronouns, ganyan, di ba? With pronouns, how one pronoun relates to the other, no? Yeah, how one person relates to the other in the form of expressing it in the pronouns of a sentence. Ganyan. So may pagkakaiba siya. Okay, so things like that. Actually, meron yung languages natin within the Philippines, for example, Tagalog and most of the languages in the Visayan region would fall into one subgroup. And then Ilocano and the other languages of Northern Luzon na mainland Luzon would fall into another big group. So medyo ano yan, merong distinct characteristics and groupings na yan. While Batanes, so the language of Batanes would still fall in another group. Okay? Another group. Yung Kapampangan, yung Zambal, yung Bolinao, may maliit silang grouping. May maliit silang grouping. And then when you look at the languages of Mindanao, no, many of the languages of Mindanao would form a group with the languages of Sulawesi, halimbawa, no, in Indonesia. Okay, so ganyan yung mga groupings natin. From Aldous again. Susu milk in Malay, Malay and Indonesian. In bahasa Malay, in bahasa Indonesian, yes. So yung mga terms natin, across Austronesian languages, generally, pwede magkakapareho. Pero minsan nagkakaiba sila, no? on how they refer to what referent. Halimbawa yung suso na in Tagalog would mean breast, whereas in Malay it would mean milk. Halimbawa mag-order ka ng milk, ano ba 'yun? Yung kape na may gatas, no? Sa isang stall, halimbawa sa Malaysia or Singapore or Indonesia, pwede mo sabihin kopi susu. Okay? Kopi susu, maintindihan nila yan. Coffee with milk. Okay, so ganun natin tinitignan yung mga languages at pinag-aaralan, and then and how we classify them. So, languages and then artifacts. Doon sa artifacts, halimbawa, merong mga dinala sila, no? Halimbawa, it is hypothesized that they brought the Austronesian, the Neolithic artifacts from Taiwan and ultimately from southern China into northern Philippines. Ganyan yung sinasabi, halimbawa nung mga writings ni Bellwood. If you have read them, no, basahin nyo yun. So the pottery, no? Yun nga lang, meron silang problema doon. No? While the pottery of Taiwan, no, during that time, during the Neolithic of Taiwan, was scored mark. Pagdating sa Batanes and Northern Luzon, hindi sila masyadong makakita ng ganun na markings on pottery. Ano pa? Ano pa ba yung mga alam nyo na Neolithic artifacts? Davina. Sige, I will be calling muna. Calling persons. Davina.
Yes po.
Yes. And what are the other examples of Neolithic artifacts in the Philippines?
Yung ano po, in the Philippines, Neolithic artifacts.
Aside from pottery, ano pa yung alam nyo?
Stone adzes po.
Ads. Okay, tama.
Ads po ba ang pronunciation doon? Sorry, sir.
Tama, no? So ads could be made of stone, no? Different kinds of stone, halimbawa, no? Or it could be made of shell. In the Philippines, we can see ads is made of shell. In Palawan, most especially. Meron pa ba? Ano pa yung mga alam nyo na artifacts? We can also consider blade as an artifact. Blade, well, artifact of the Neolithic, no? Pero tulad nung sinabi ko sa video, the blade oftentimes do not stop there, no? They are still fashioned out into different specialized artifacts, which they can use, for example, in fishing, in cutting specific things, no? or for manipulating other materials, no? Like siguro hides, no? Or other plant parts. Okay? Ito yung mga gamit ng blades natin. Ano pa yung pwede natin sabihin tungkol sa Neolithic? Aside from that, so meron tayong artifacts ulit, meron tayong language, also the food resources. Okay, Neolithic society may also have been hunter-gatherers, but part of them are now starting to experiment on domesticating plants and animals and other organisms like fungi, no? Or yeasts, halimbawa, no? Which they could have used in the fermenting process. Okay, so yan, no? Halo-halo sila doon. May nag-hunt, may nag-gather, and meron na ring nag-experiment sa domestication. Although not the large-scale domestication that we know of today. No? Halimbawa, yung bukid, ganyan, or malalaking farms or piggery, hindi ganun na scale. Okay, originally they have subsisted. It was supposed, no? Originally they have subsisted on root crops. So ano yung mga native root crops natin sa Pilipinas? Sige, ube, yes, ube. Ano pa? Taro. Meron pa ba? I think I mentioned one kind of root crop, no, na para siyang kapatid ng ube pero hindi commercially available, no? The some ethnic groups, halimbawa yung mga Mangyan, so they eat that, no? Yam would be ube, ube. Whereas kamote, yung kamote na alam natin, no, supposedly galing yan sa New World. It is not indigenous to the Philippines. So, but there are still researchers, no, who are persistently continuing trying to find out kung ganun nga ba, kung galing talaga sa New World, because it was said that well, according to some, the agriculture of the people of New Guinea, no? Yung island ng New Guinea sa Melanesia, yung binabanggit pa natin kanina. Their agriculture was based on kamote, no? Nandun sila sa highland, no? The more advanced cultures and civilization of New Guinea are said to have started on the interior, no? Halimbawa dun sa highland areas nito. Cassava. Yung cassava ay galing din sa New World. Cassava is kamoteng kahoy, di ba? Yung balinghoy in Bisaya and Batangas, Tagalog, Batanggen. Toge is toge. I think it is also native, no? The Philippines, toge. Root crop din to, iba yung toge na munggo sprouts, iba naman yan, no? Toge din yung tinatawag dun kasi. Okay, so they started off with subsisting on these root crops together with hunting and then gathering. And then later on, nag-experiment sila halimbawa dun sa mga grains na supposedly dinala nila from Taiwan. What are the grains that they may have brought to the Philippines? Siyempre, bigas, rice. And there are many forms, no? Or many, many species of rice, yes. But within Oryza sativa, there are also many variants, no? Katulad nung COVID-19, maraming variants. So palay, halimbawa, is one type of grain that they brought to the Philippines. Yes, sugarcane, no? I think they may have brought that, no? I'm not sure with the ancestry of sugarcane, no? Also coconut. Maybe it is the homeland of these plants are generally in our region. Northern Luzon, and then the most of the Southeast Asian region. Also banana, no? Banana, Southeast Asia then, and also Melanesia. Breadfruit din, ganun din. Okay. So take note that these plants enumerated, no, by Nicole, sugarcane, coconut, and breadfruit, these are the ones that the Austronesians later brought to the islands of the Pacific. Halimbawa sa Micronesia, sa Polynesia, no, like Samoa, Tonga, and then Hawaii. Dati wala namang yan, wala diyan mga breadfruit, sugarcane. Only the Austronesians have brought that to these places. And originally walang tao doon. Okay, walang tao doon. Sila yung Sila yung pinakaunang tao. Kung titignan nyo yung demographics ng Southeast Asian region, so babanggitin na natin ito, no? yung demographics, ipapasok na rin natin. Makikita nyo na according to Bellwood, no? Pag binasa nyo yung sinabi ni Bellwood, originally meron tayong older populations characterized by the Melanesian or Australoid stock. Ito halimbawa yung mga dumagats, no? The dumagats, the people of New Guinea, the original inhabitants of Australia. No? These are they typify the older inhabitants of our region, no? Southeast Asian region. And then later on, dumating yung mga quote-unquote, well, fair-skinned, no? Na medyo iba yung morphological characteristics sila dun sa mga Australoid people. And one explanation of this, no? A good explanation for this would be the coming of the Austronesians from the northern latitudes. Yes, Nicole, you are raising your hand.
Sir, gusto ko lang po ulit tanungin, ano po yung nasabi niyo po na root crop po noon dati?
Ano yung?
Yung root crop po.
Root crop.
Na, opo, na
Okay.
sabi niyo po nakakaiba. Bibili po kasi namin po yung alala.
Hindi ko alam kung Mangyan name yata ito. Yung naiisip ko ngayon is Niame. Niame. I don't know if it is similar to the name to its names in the Cordillera. Pero Niame sa bandang Mindoro. Okay? Ito ay kapatid din siya ng ube, no? Pero ibang species ng ube. No? Pareho sila ng genus. Dioscorea, yung genus din niya katulad ng ube na kinakain natin, no? Yung ginagawang ano yun sa Good Shepherd, yung ube pudding niya o ice cream, no? Pero yung Niame, Dioscorea din yung genus, pero iba yung species. Hispida. I think Hispida. Okay, so iba yung genus niya. Iba yung species name niya, sorry. Dioscorea is okay. Kasi ito ay medyo ano ba natin sasabihin, no? If you do not prepare this properly, no? It will cause harm to you. May mga toxic compounds ito na pwedeng makasama sa katawan. Okay, so merong special preparation na ginagawa para dito. Okay, so that is Niame. Nasaan na ako? No? So nakuha niyo yun, no? Yung demographics natin, no? Nung Southeast Asia. So originally meron tayong Australoid or Melanesoid or Melanesian type ng population which was the original population in the region according to our scholars. And later on when the Austronesian speakers arrived, no, ito na yung mga tao na nagpopulate halimbawa sa Pilipinas, sa Indonesia and other parts of Southeast Asia. I am not sure with Indochina, no? Kasi yung languages nila doon would not fall under the Austronesian family. Meron silang ibang family pati. Okay. So halimbawa sa Burma, this would fall under, this would be grouped under the family of the Chinese languages and the Tibetan languages. So, languages of the Himalayas, Himalayan mountains. Okay. Okay, so we have that, na, and the evidence for this would be genetic, na they have been doing genetic studies with this. No? Halimbawa, tinitignan nila yung similarities between the Dumagats and between the other groups that look similar to them, and also the other groups, no? Like the mainstream Filipino populations or the other ethnic groups, no? In the Philippines and even in Indonesia and all the others in Southeast Asia. Okay. So yung groupings na ito ay may sinasabi, no, na may similarities nga yung mga Australoid populations. Aside from that, they have also been doing skeletal analysis, no, in order to find out if there are if the skeletal record, no, or skeletal data would tell something about relationships of these populations. So sinasabi yan dun sa sinulat ni Bellwood. Okay. So do you have any questions aside from that? No, ito yung ano natin, no, yung tungkol sa Paleolithic at saka sa Neolithic. No? So basahin niyo yung kay Bellwood. No? This is only an overview of that. No? Kung gusto niyo makita yung details, basahin niyo doon. No? And then, yung 3 types of exchanges, sabi ko na, di ba? When we go into the metal period, binabanggit natin halimbawa yung role ng metal in the formation of complex societies, halimbawa, because this was a time when social complexity was becoming more intense. No? Halimbawa, there was the appearance of ranking, no? Ranking, no? In societies. There is a high or an elite class and then a lower class. No, yeah, yes, yung prestige goods natin. No? So this could be seen in the artifact or in the archaeological record. No? For example, in the form of prestige goods, yung defense structures, sinabi ko na, no? Evidence for long distance trade, kasama din yan. No? Siyempre kasama na rin yung prestige goods dun sa ano natin, no? Yung issue ng long distance trade, ano pa ba yung mga archaeological correlates of complexity and ranking. So papasok na tayo dun sa paano nyo malalaman kung meron isang polity, no, na nandun sa lugar noon. Halimbawa, may mga tanong halimbawa na what was the extent of the polity, or was this particular community included in the polity, in that polity during that time? Yung mga okay, so prestige goods, blue porcelain would also be an example of prestige goods and gold then. So for example, ano ba yung mga bagay na nagsasabi sa inyo, no? Halimbawa kayo, 'di ba? Lahat kayo, yung mga communities nyo, no? Ano yung pwedeng makapagsabing bagay na part kayo ng Pilipinas, o bahagi kayo ng Pilipinas. In your room, for example, in your room, ano yung mga bagay na pwede magsabi sa inyo na pag nakita, ano yung part nga kayo ng Pilipinas. So Filipino ideology and way of thinking or thought is also shared, no, by your household. Tabo, pwede naman, no? Pwede, no? So that is an example of an artifact, no? Kasi yung mga iba naman hindi nagtatabo, no? Di ba? Nakikita din naman natin yan. Yung mga iba halimbawa, mas gusto nilang gumamit ng toilet paper, no? Which is not very popular in Filipino households. Although marami namang gumagamit, no? Pero sinasabi ko lang na na hindi kasing popular ng tabo. So merong sino ito? Walis tingting. Tingting. Ang naisip ko tuloy, tingting ginagamit sa like toilet paper, hindi pala. Hindi, iba pala iba yung usapin ng tingting. Akala ko yung pangwalis ay ginagamit din as Okay, yung tingting ay ginagamit nga ng Pinoy kasi hindi ka masyado makakita halimbawa ng tingting sa ibang lugar, no? or ibang bansa. Although merong forms din, no, na walis na parang tingting. Madalas din pong nasasabing Pinoy ka kapag may picture or painting ng Last Supper. Yes, no, that is true, no? Kasi Catholic yung mga Pinoy. Okay, so tama lahat yung mga sinabi nyo. Pero ano yung pinaka sigurado? Halimbawa, if you are, lahat naman yata kayo nasa bahay ngayon, no? So hindi ko ito magagamit na wala kayong dala dyan ngayon. Hindi katulad pagka nagkaklase tayo. Okay, adobo, sinigang, no, yung part naman yan, no, totoo din yan, no? Yung the types of food that we eat, no? At saka munggo, adobo. Okay, pero meron halimbawang mga bagay na palagi nating kasama. But without it, we cannot do normal activity in the Philippines. Cellphone, yung mga iba wala, pwede rin, no? Pero yung mga iba nabubuhay naman sila ng walang cellphone. Ano sa tingin nyo? Ano kaya? Okay. Okay? Diba? So you cannot do business, halimbawa, or you cannot transact without artifacts such as this. Okay? Ganon din halimbawa yung magpapanotaryo ka, magandang example. Magpa-file ka halimbawa ng registry dun sa munisipyo, no? You need documentary stamps and you need yung stamp with ink, no? Kailangan patatakan mo 'yun. And that in effect is the icon or the seal that stands for the state or the polity. No, katulad din nito, no? 'Di ba? Yung ayan, no, meron tayong halimbawa sa gisag ng lagay ba dito Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. So may logo yung barya natin. Dito din. Yan, merong personage, no? In the form of Dr. Rizal dito sa piso. Nakasulat din diyan, no, na Republika ng Pilipinas. Kasi tayong lahat ay bahagi ng Pilipinas, no? So that when we would like to do something, no, especially transact, no, kailangan natin ng mga bagay na katulad nito. Kasi ito yung permissible na gamitin. Also with stamps, no, halimbawa in Germany during that time, these are the stamps of the Weimar Republic. The Weimar Republic was was the government between World War I, World War II, no? Yung quote-unquote peacetime na tinatawag. Okay, at that time, medyo malaki na rin ang Germany. So nasakop nila yung malaking bahagi ng Poland. Okay, that was these stamps were in use during the 1930s, no? In the German Empire, no? The Weimar Republic. Hitler would soon come into power, no, after a few years. So mid 1930s. Saka magiging powerful yung mga Nazi. But during the 1940s, no, 1940s, so napapansin niyo yan, no, merong Deutsche Reich. No? But during the 1940s, bawa 1943, 1944, lalong lumaki yung Germany, no? Pinalaki ni Hitler. So yung Europe, essentially, no, yung kabuuan ng Europe ay kinamkam niya or ginawa niyang puppet states yung mga ibang nation, such that nagpalit sila ng stamp, imbis na Deutsche Reich ang ilagay nila, Großdeutsche Reich na. So bigger German territory or empire, no? Empire kasi empire naman yung Germany, no? So ito yung stamp nung 1944, no? Ganon din sa Mesopotamia noong unang panahon at ganon din dito sa Southeast Asia, no? So those empires, they mint their not really paper stamps, no, but coinage, for example, no? Halimbawa yung mga coins natin from Indochina noon, no, na pumupunta minsan, nakikita natin sa Pilipinas. Ito yung mga currency ng Indo-Chinese at saka Indonesian polities, okay? Kasi ito yung ginagamit nila as currency for transaction. Although syempre marami naman sa kanila, no, hanggang ngayon, no, they do their transactions through barter trade. Ibig sabihin, the commodities are directly exchanged, no, without the need for currency. Okay. Ganyan din po ba? Okay, so coins. Ganyan din po ba yung mga stamps na makikita sa PH, Philippine Post Office po? Yes, ganito din, no? Minsan tignan nyo yung museum nila doon, but I haven't gone to that yet, no? I haven't visited the museum in Manila, yung Post Office Museum. Pero makikita nyo doon yung evolution halimbawa ng Philippine state, no? From the American period, even before, no, 'di ba, may stamp ako na pinakita yata sa inyo dati. No? Nakalagay na doon Pilipinas, pero yung personalities na inilalagay nila doon ay yung head of state nung bansa na nakasakop sa Pilipinas. No? Which at that time would be halimbawa the 1890s, Alfonso XIII, no? Bata pa siya noon. Hindi na feature sa stamp yata yung nanay niya, no? Pero siya yung talagang nagmamanipulate ng mga ginagawa ng Espanya noon. And then come the American period, halimbawa sila McKinley, no? Yan na yung naka-feature sa stamps. Although, dahil ginawa nilang national hero si Dr. C. Rizal, inilagay din nila sa stamp yun, no? Si Rizal nung American period. Okay, and then later on, 1946 independence, nag-iba na naman, no? Yung mga Philippine personalities ang talagang inilagay nila. No? Wala na yung mga Americans. At saka yung mga important events and important or well-known icons of the Philippines. So halimbawa yung mga tourist spots natin, no, like Mayon Volcano, yan yung nilalagay nila. And then later on, yung mga events na, no, happening in the government, for example, or in Philippine society. Halimbawa, yung mga oath-taking ni ganito at ganyang president, and then the conference that was held, no, conference of importance being held in the Philippines, no? So yun yung mga features ng stamps natin, no? The same way, halimbawa nung unang panahon, kung paano din nila fini-feature yung mga personalities nila dun sa coins at saka sa mga stamps nila, no? Sa Mesopotamia, sa Rome, at kung saan-saan pang mga empire. Okay? Yes, so from Aldous, no? Spanish, English, at Filipino, no? So Filipinas, no, yung halimbawa stamp ulit. Pilipinas and then Philippine Islands. Tapos napalitan ng Philippines up to the time of the Third Republic, no, 1946, when the Philippines gained its independence. Philippines pa rin yung nakalagay dun sa stamps. And then by 1962, pinalitan Pilipinas na. No? Pilipinas. No? Nung Spanish time, Filipinas. F. Okay, so hanggang ngayon, Pilipinas, no, with the P ang nilalagay nila sa stamps. Okay, so ganyan katindi yung mga bagay na yan. No, maliliit siya, no, but it will remind you of the ideology that you should be in, that you should be part of. Okay? Ano pa? Have I mentioned to you about craft specialization? I think I also mentioned to you. Craft specialization is also one aspect of intensifying social complexity. Craft specialization. Anong nangyayari pagka nag-i-specialize yung mga tao? Halimbawa, ikaw specialized kang gumawa ng palayok. Ikaw naman specialized kang gumawa ng gulok or itak. Ikaw specialized kang gumawa ng bangka and so on. No? So ang nangyayari dito, no, we are standardizing procedures. For example, in the making of pots, there was a time when the pots were being done at the household level. So kanya-kanyang bahay, gumagawa ng kanilang mga palayok. And then later on, yung hypothesis natin ay merong point in time na ginawa nilang centralized yung paggawa ng pots. Now, how centralized this was needs to be qualified, di ba? So pwedeng centralized lang among a few households or several households or part of the polity or the whole polity, no, depende yon. Okay, so maybe I will give you an exercise or a question, no, about craft specialization, no? Kasi maganda ito dun sa yung isang article on the Bais archaeological site, no, of Negros Oriental. No? Merong binabanggit doon na isang research wherein they found out that there was a trend towards standardization. Okay. Ano pa ang pwede nating sabihin, no? So economy and subsistence, and then ideology, political aspect, no? Or political control, pwede rin natin sabihin na gano'n. No? Yung political control kasi could come in the form of police power or the army. Diba? When you have a police force, ibig sabihin, meron kayong kailangan depensahan at meron kayong kailangan protektahan. But not only that, meron kayong kailangang ilagay sa ayos, no? Ibig sabihin, if your constituents are not up to your standards or to your regulations or laws, for example, you send the police in order to do something, no? In order to correct that. No? So halimbawa daw, no, yung itong si President, no, one way of doing that was killing of drug addicts or drug pushers, no, halimbawa, ganun. In other countries like Singapore, ganun din, no. Well, hindi sila walang tokhang, no, pero they arrest you and then they put you into trial and then sentence you depending on the severity, no. With drug issue, they can they can sentence you to death, no, or they can send you to jail, no, with a very long prison term, no, depending on the severity. Okay, so ganyan din, no, yung police power, no? Also military power, no, because when it comes to the military, no, you make an army, you have soldiers so that you could protect your polity. If you want to do some raid, no, of another polity, you also have the soldiers in order to accomplish that. Okay, so if you are lacking in resources and you plan to get the resources for the whole territory and people of the other polity, you have your soldiers or your army to do that. Okay, so besides those direct physical force, you also have ways to control the thinking of people, like using artifacts, no, as small as coins or stamps, no, or yung pantatak, no, that you could imprint on papers that you issue or that or the registries that are being filed. Okay, propaganda books, yes, no, propaganda like in China, di ba, yung up to now ganun pa rin, no. Diba, may balita ngayon na, di ba, yung human rights issue, no, is always the thing that they accuse China of, no, and that is why recently, no, that the United States have thought of boycotting the Winter Olympics on February, di ba? I don't know if you have read the news about it. Kasi ang China magaling sa propaganda, no? Pero hindi lang 'yun, pati rin naman United States and other countries, no? Even the Philippines too, no? Lalong-lalo na nung time ni Marcos, no? Si Marcos yung pinakamagaling gumawa ng propaganda, no? I don't know if you are familiar with all those songs, so yung songs ng Bagong Lipunan and all those things, no? Very grandiose, no? Kung papanoorin mo, such that maraming tao talaga ang mapapaniwala. Okay, no, even in Singapore, no, a small nation should maintain its integrity, kaya marami din silang ginagawang mga ganitong paraan in order to make people close to them. Okay. From Amiel, booklets po na may nilalaman na current events, saan na yan? Na may nilalaman na current events na ipinamumudmod sa mga mag-aaral. Yes. No? Yes, totoo yun. No? Especially during your K-12 years. Nung time namin, ganun din. No? Nung elementary, ganyan din. No? Pag pinamemorize, yung pinamemorize halimbawa yung roster ng cabinets ni Marcos, no, paulit-ulit mong gagawin yun, no, i-memorize, and I am not really good at memorization, no, kaya hindi maganda yung nagiging score ko, no. And yet palagi nilang ine-extol, no, yung kagalingan, no, ng mga tao na ito, no. Although marami naman sa kanila ang magagaling talaga, no. Marami naman magagaling, no, although corrupt, no. Parang si Marcos, magaling siya, no, pero maraming kalokohan. No? Pero among the presidents, ay ituturing talaga natin na magaling siya. Okay. Ano pa ba ang kailangan kong sabihin? No? Now for religion, so meron na namang chat message si Nicole. Possible po ba kaya na maging artifact, for example, yung mga receipt from stores, resto or fast food po? Yes, of course. Because it is material, it is an object, no? Material, it is an object. Kaya posibleng magiging artifact yan. Technically, pwede naman yan. No? Yung binabanggit ka ba na food dito? Artifact, yung resibo lang naman, no? Receipt from stores, resto, or fast food. Technically, it is an artifact, but historians would consider it, written sources, no, of historical evidence. But technically, it is an artifact, no, because it is paper or cardboard, halimbawa, no, or material in which you could write on. Ayon kay Arendt, basta it's considered a work of our hands, artifact siya, yes, no? Because it was made by human beings. No? Kaya pwede natin sabihin na artifact. Di ba yung definition din natin noon ng artifact? Okay, so from political, we move on now to the belief system. Di ba binanggit nyo din yata yung belief system ng mga nakaraang reports. What are the archaeological evidences of belief systems? So I have here, andali, i-screen share ko ito. Screen share. Nakikita nyo ba?
Opo, sir.
Yes. Okay. What are the artifacts that you can say that would tell you that this is a religious setting or place?
Yung mukha po ni Jesus.
Okay, number one, yung icons. Halimbawa, meron tayong deities dyan in the form of Jesus, no? Yung mukha or ulo ni Jesus. Ano pa?
Yung wax po, wax.
Wax in the form of candles. Okay, wax candles. Yung ba yung ano? Yung gusto mo sabihin?
Yes, sir, yes, yes. Kasi pag natunaw naman na hindi na siya parang kandila na ano, yung
Okay.
form niya.
Okay, so wax, candles, ano pa? Meron pa ba?
Flowers po, sir.
Flowers, yes. So sige, tatanungin ko kayo. Paano nyo nasabi na items of religious significance itong mga ito? Or could tell you something about religion or belief systems? Sige. Halimbawa yung Jesus, no, yung mukha or ulo ni Jesus. Bakit niyo nasabi? Sige. Basta mag-ano lang kayo, sumagot lang kayo, no? Hindi naman kailangan maging complicated yung sagot niyo.
Ano po, sir? Face po ng religion. Nagsisimbolize po kay God. I mean, siya po talaga yung mismong God, pero face po ng religion.
Okay. Sige. So kasi may kilala natin siya na for the Catholics, for example, siya yung pwede mag-symbolize about God. No? From Samantha, okay. Yung nicho po mismo, nicho po ba tawag? Okay. So nicho din, no? Kasama din yan. So nicho. How about the candles? Bakit natin sinasabing part siya or nagsasabi siya about religion?
Ano po, sir?
Yes, sige.
Parang, ano yung pong tawag dito? It symbolizes life po kasi. Tapos according po sa belief ng Christianity, si God daw po yung light. Ganun po, sir.
Okay. So according to belief, to symbolism, di ba? Meron tayong mga bagay na natatandaan, recurring symbols, for example, na just like the coin, nasa na yung barya. So just like the coin na merong symboli, ito. Okay, yung barya, no? Lalapit ko na lang dito sa screen. Okay. Yung mga patterns halimbawa or the signs that you see, no, could suggest that you are part of this activity or this belief system or this polity, di ba? Ganun yan. Aside from symbolism, meron pa bang pwedeng pwedeng sabihin itong mga ito, no? Or ano pa yung paano sila nakakakuha ng attention nyo? Yes, Nicole.
Sir, sa flowers po, parang expected po na ano siya, for offerings po talaga siya.
For offerings, kasi tradition
Sa
na
mga
natin.
opo, sa mga poon, ganun po. Tapos parang connected na po siya sa faith kapag may flowers. As parang yun nga po, offering po siya.
Okay. Sige, kasi by tradition, pwede rin natin sabihin may symbolic ano din, no, aspect. Sige, Hans.
And sir, add ko lang po, kung tinitignan din po kasi sir sa lapida, nakalagay po yung parang from this date to this date, which may signify na ganito sila pinanganak, tapos doon sila namatay. So parang this is a place sa mga dead people. Tapos ganun po. Ayan po, sir.
Okay. So makikita kasi natin diyan yung ano, no, yung dun sa inscription na patay na itong lahat na to, no? Therefore iba yung attitude natin. So posible, no? Dadating tayo dun sa ano na 'yon. Yung realization na 'yon na gano'n, no? And therefore because they are dead, iba yung attitude natin, no? It could be pagpapahalagaan natin sila or siguro matatakot tayo sa kanila, pwede rin, no? Or masyadong matinding respeto yung pwede natin ibigay sa kanila. Sige, sino pa yung nagre-raise ng hand? Hans, ikaw nagre-raise ka pa ng hand?
Hindi ko lang po, sir, na lower. Sorry po.
Okay. Sige, Aldous.
Yung mismong image po na yan kasi is yung very na-embody niya na yung very belief na may afterlife tayo, na may concept tayo ng kapag namatay ka is parang nandyan ka pa, like that. So it's very strange na ilagay mo lahat ng katawan ng namatay na tao sa community in one place tapos dadalawin nyo ganon. So it's very strange kapag nakita mo yung ganyan. So it embodies something na that people in the community believe, which is the afterlife or they exist kahit patay na sila.
Okay. So maganda ring ano yan, no? Opinion. Pag pumunta kayo sa ganitong lugar, no? Ano ang may experience niyo? Without thinking pa, halimbawa, no? Bukod pa halimbawa sa dun sa iisipin nyo, ano yung una nyong ma-experience using your senses, halimbawa?
Sir, ano po, parang basta bawal pong magsalita. Parang tahimik lang po dapat lahat. Ganun po.
Okay. Pero ano yung ano yung makikita or dadating sa senses mo, no? Yung mga sense organs mo. Meron ba? In the first place, meron ba? May feeling ng pagkasakrosanct place na yan. So pag pumunta ka sa lugar na ito, most likely, kung hindi mo man halimbawa alam itong lugar na ito, no? Wala ka pang realization, makikita mo na kaagad itong mga nandiyan. No? So for example, wala nakikitang bodies, yes. Pero mapapansin mo na itong mga naka-display na yan. No? Halimbawa yung head ng mga deities or ni Jesus, ganyan, or ni Mary or ng mga angels. And you could also see candles. No? In effect, yung attention mo ay makukuha. Diba? So kaya tayo halimbawang nagsisindi ng kandila according to some scholars, no? Halimbawa yung mga scholars na ang tingin nila sa mga bagay, no, ay masyadong physical. Ito ay mga pangkuha ng attention nyo. The image of a deity, the sight of a lit candle, pero hindi nga lang sight pati yung aroma, the aroma of candles, the aroma of flowers. But these are the things that you would that would call your attention, no? And most likely, because you have this experience already before, it would make you think that you are in a religious place. The same way, for example, when you are in a church. When you are in a church, ganun din yung mararanasan nyo. So for example, merong mga devices that would get your attention, no, in order to focus them. Maybe in one place or in one thing. Halimbawa, the altar of a church. Diba, meron tayong aisle, tapos yung mga upuan ay nandito sa tabi. But when you enter the church, doon ka papasok doon sa gitna. And you can look straight to the aisle and then the altar. Okay, kasi yun ganun ginawa yung simbahan, no? No, para ma-focus yung attention mo. Also with the lighting of candles, the placing of flowers in their proper places. The placing of poons, no? Or yung mga imahin natin in a church or in a kapilya, ganun din. So we focus our attention. At ito yung mga bagay-bagay na pwede rin natin tignan sa archaeological record. No? Pero marami pang iba, no? Hindi lang yan. No? Kasi halimbawa, if we look at archaeological correlates of religion, we should omit other possibilities by which that artifact could refer to. Halimbawa, kung hindi pwedeng magsabi yun tungkol sa political aspect or economic aspect, baka sa religion. Baka yun yung gamit niya. That is why we have that. Okay? So the time is now 7:30. Meron pa ba kayong tanong? Tignan natin ng huling beses yung chat. Ano yung pati reveal? Patay. Pati tuloy, no? Sorry, patay pala.
Sir, joke lang po yun dun sa chat.
Okay. Meron pa kayong tanong? Other questions? We will not meet on Thursday. Bibigyan ko kayo ng time para i-review, no? Basahin yung ibang chapters ng book na ibinigay ko sa inyo. Yes, Amiel?
Sir, magbibigay po ba kayo ng pointers po na yung specific pointers po na aaralin po ng topics po?
Yes. Ibibigay ko siguro as an assignment.
Thank you po, sir.
Okay. Kasi iniisip ko rin magbigay ng assignment ulit para dumami pa rin yung points. Okay, other questions? Yung mga nagsusulat ng paper, kung meron kayong tanong, i-email nyo lang ako. Okay, so we will not meet on Thursday. We will be meeting pag naisipan ko sa December 14. No? Pero most likely, yes, December 16 we will still meet. Meron pang isang tanong. No? How different burial practices remain in the present, whether it be primary, secondary, is imperative on how people give importance to the belief of afterlife in modern times. Yes, no? Meron pa rin naman kasi tayong secondary burial ngayon. No? Although most of societies, Filipino societies nowadays practice primary inhumation. Okay. And I think many still believe in the afterlife. No? Many. Yung mga iba naman na hindi naniniwala sa afterlife, at least gusto pa rin nila na maging respectable yung disposal ng remains nila. Yun na lang sasabihin ko. Okay, so nandun pa rin, no? The proper way of holding burial rites or disposal rites. If you believe in the afterlife, medyo gagandahan mo yan, no? Pag-iigihan mo. Although for Buddhists and Hindus, kinikremate nila. No? Because they believe that mabubuhay ka pa rin naman. No? If you are still not qualified for nirvana or enlightenment, no? The ultimate one, babalik ka pa rin naman. No? So your body is just a temporary shell. So for Christians like us, Catholics and other Christians, also Muslims, no, ano pa rin, no? They give importance to the afterlife. Okay? Sige, dahil kulang tayo sa oras, so ipapakita pa sana ako na sementeryo ng mga Muslim. Pero hindi ko na maipapakita. Anyway, next time na lang. No? If you discuss this topic next week. Okay? Thank you for attending. Hope to see you again next week at palagi kayong mag-iingat.
Thank you po, sir.
Thank you po, sir. Thank you po.
Thank you,
Thank you
sir.
po.
Ingat din po.
You may leave now.